will on.
Is on.
I see the bad moon rising. I see travelers on the way. I see that pretend the lightning. I see that time's away. Don't go out tonight. It's gonna take a life. There's a battle on the rise. Don't go out tonight. It's gonna take a life. There's a battle on the rise.
Right, okay. So this is Extinctionati meeting 120, the soup episode, in which we are going to... Oh, I didn't say the date. It's the 16th of October, 2022. Yeah, hopefully you won't get it for this because it's a thingy bob, different thing. But let's see. Where was it? Now I've lost my thread. Okay. Yeah, it's the soup episode. We're here to discuss soup, the preciousness of elite Western art. I don't know what to think about the actual soup itself. I've seen, for some bizarre reason, I've been on Twitter, which is always a terrible idea. That makes me despair and have all sorts of thoughts inappropriate to share with civilized human beings. But the general atmosphere on Twitter is these people are beyond the pale. This is the wrong thing to do. This is not the right way to deal with the climate crisis. These are middle-class wankers who don't have any consideration for the plight of the working class is something. And when I just say, who gives a shit, it's just a fucking painting, people seem to be very, very upset. And so, yeah, I guess that's the opener there. GS, are you going to take it away from there?
Yeah, I can fill some people in. There's some museum in London with what do you call it? Not modern art, but art that is from Van Gogh, for instance. I guess he's modern, but he's a Dutch painter. And the campaign called Just Stop Oil, they smashed some tomato soup, tinned tomato soup, into the painting of the sunflowers. And there's a lot of there are a lot of details here that are crucial. For instance, that it's an oil painting, and some people on Twitter and on YouTube made a lot of fun about Just Stop Oil attacking it because it was painted with oil paint. And another detail is that you had a glass or plexiglass or some kind of protection in front of the actual painting, and the painting is most likely just a copy anyway. In any case, the painting itself wasn't damaged, but through throwing said soup on said painting, these punks or goths or young, restless.
They sound like public school English.
Probably homeless and unwashed people, young people. We never did this in my day. They actually managed to break through the sound barrier when it comes to normies and what normies talk about and react to on the interwebs. So that, for instance, you got the very conservative, very polite London subreddit to talk about soup and Dutch art. Yeah, I think many of those people broke their personal bests when it comes to art discussion. as a mostly negative reaction to this Just Stop Oil climate campaign action. And I think on Twitter, on one of my favorite professors in the climate sphere, there was a poll even to talk about is it bad or right or okay, acceptable to destroy or fake destroy art in the fight for a living planet, and 66% or something says yes, go ahead, use art in your struggle. Yeah.
Do you think that there's any expectation that this will bring the conversation into wider discourse, or will it have its 15 minutes of fame and then we'll be bored of soup?
Yeah, I think it's zero impact. I think the human beings will up the denialism in direct proportion to how closely they're forced to interact with the actual information.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it succeeds. The action succeeds in the sense that it gets normal people to obsess about it and talk about it and anger rage against it. And that is, if you compare it to sitting in the motorway, it's basically the same way. You piss people off, and that means they are taken out of their slumber for a little while, and so that is kind of the technical part of it. Of course, it doesn't change actions or policies in the real world, but I guess from an activist point of view, it's successful if you can get people to raise an eyebrow or something.
Yeah, I guess I think of the people in these groups as heroic for what they're doing because they're very brave. I don't know whether, yeah, I don't see any outcome really occurring as a result of their activities. So, I mean, yeah, like when you watch these, I saw a clip of some driver yelling at a group of Just Stop Oil people who were typically glued to road somewhere in London, saying, "Oh, your sourdough bread needs fuel. Your avocados need fuel." And you just think it's just beyond me how fucking clueless people are determined to remain. And the fact that environmentalism or concern for the environment or whatever the hell you call it is it's just seen as like middle-class twats being middle-class twats, and it's some sort of self-indulgent middle-class twats who want to glue themselves to the road. I mean, yeah, I don't know, the fact that people are just brushing this off as, oh look, these annoying people want to glue themselves to the road just to fucking ruin my day, and that's it. And the fact that you've got like whatever these people are, I'm watching it now, this clip, and there's a man, like a middle-aged guy in sort of Marks and Spencer clothes, forcefully dragging the middle-aged sort of white middle-class protesty people off the road because, my God, somebody's obstructed the traffic. And when you look at like local, and I'm sure everybody experiences, when you look at local Facebook groups or whatever to do with a particular area, there's basically endless thousands of people having these non-stop conversations about, do you know why there's a police helicopter flying around? And what's going on with the traffic? Oh, there's roadworks on Acacia Avenue. I was stuck in the traffic. I was stuck in the traffic. I was stuck in the traffic. And so it's kind of like a sort of like surreal amplification of that, where you've got these like irritated drivers who are stuck in the traffic because I don't know. This is just, it's so bizarre. And like people will just do anything not to have to deal with the fact that they've murdered the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it's the reaction is kind of understandable. If there is a let's say it's been a storm and there's a tree blocking the road, or some other casual hindrance to the road, or planned road work or something, then you are just mildly irritated. But I do understand that you get extra wound up if you know that these are people, maybe from the other side of the politics spectrum, and people intentionally sabotaging your little trip to the 7-Eleven or whatever, to the hospital or to your kids' school. So the fact that you've pinpointed the problem, and the problem is people who want to be an asshole and want to sit in your road. I kind of understand that. It's kind of similar to a leak springing in your gas pipeline by accident or by earthquake or something, and a superpower that we shall not mention actually exploding it with plastic explosives, in the Baltic. Uh, we can forgive nature if nature makes a hole in a road, but we kind of don't want to forgive these young punks sitting in the road and gluing themselves intentionally.
So yeah, so we're just stuck there. So who here is going to go and glue themselves to the road? and should we, or is there any point? Should we go and take those road glued people a nice bowl of soup?
I don't know. It's too cold to sit on the road up here in Greenland, so maybe somebody else.
Yeah, well, oddly enough, it's not cold in London, but again, everybody's saying there's no particular reason why that would be the case. It's just that the weather changes periodically, and there never were any insects. That was just made up.
I kind of wonder whether the soup is a change in the strategy, because when people were sitting in the roads or gluing themselves to the roads, they're really disrupting the practical part of of the middle class lives. But when they're throwing soup, and on art, that's not a disruption. It's and not of the middle class. It's more of it seems like it's something different, that the audience is different. What do you guys think?
Yeah, we reached the soup stage. So the collapse has many stages, and now we're into the soup stage.
It's like courses of a meal.
Oh, so we're going to be throwing like grass-fed steak at a Monet next week.
Yeah, that's next. Yeah.
Falafel the following week for the vegans. Yeah, I just think it sort of brings to mind, because it comes back to these like there's the contingent of the solar panels and windmills people, and so I've taken to calling them denialists to their face, because I've been calling them denialists for a long time, as I'm sure many people have, and then they just go blank, and yeah, it's the same thing. It's like, I don't know. This is all very circular, isn't it? I'm going to come back to the same point that I made, that if you say to somebody, look, Who even gives a shit? It's a fucking painting, and the ecosystem is dying, and your children don't have a future. And it's just a painting. And lots of people make paintings. And even if we burn all the paintings that exist on Earth right now, God knows what the emissions issues would be with that. But even if you got rid of all the paintings that exist on Earth, then people will just make more paintings because people like making paintings. And as much as I enjoy famous paintings as much as anybody else, even though that particular painting is, I associate with sort of horrible tea trays, cheap plastic tea trays. Yeah, it's very nobody wants to engage. Nobody wants to engage with this the idea. It's very odd. Is there any hope, I guess is my question, that people will be made more than the people already? So that I think there must be a certain personality type that's willing to accept the notion of, the eco problems, whatever we call this now, the collapse of everything. There must be just a personality type that's open to accepting this idea, and then everybody else just doesn't want to know and will come up, as I said before, with any sort of rhetorical tools to deny that it's a thing. And the ultimate denialism now is going, oh, solar and windmills. And so those guys get louder at a time like this. So when something becomes widely publicized, then all the solar and windmills people, and some of those solar and windmills people seem pretty decent and sort of reasonably switched on in lots of ways, but they're going, yeah, and this is, now that these people have thrown the soup, that's really emphasizing the fact that we've got to get on and create the solar and windmills future that we dream of. And that's it. And sort of, I suppose, to possibly drop in the connection to the what do you call it, the rules or the 12 commandments of the Extinctionati. There's a bit at the end, what was it that I commented on, but it says, don't be bitter and twisted or something. Let me see, I'll quote it. Never become jaded or overripe. Don't live long enough to become embittered, cynical and resentful. And unfortunately, I'm all 4 of those things myself already, and it's not really very helpful attitude. I don't think I'm proud of it, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, where do we go from the soup?
I think there's a thing to be said about timing and soup per se. Soup as food as well, because why not? I think poor Roger Hallam and Just Stop Oil and Insulate Britain and what's the other name? Extinction Rebellion. They kind of always go into these time traps, or when there's a huge oil and gas and energy crisis, they launch their Just Stop Oil campaign. And they just go into a cul-de-sac or something and meet absolutely no understanding from the regular people. Germany and Britain are reopening coal mines at this stage, and so they could have been more lucky with their timing. And then we are going into a winter of freezing and perhaps famine in many regions, actually throwing soup on art. You shouldn't be angry about the art. You should be angry about the soup, because somebody could.
English haven't quite accepted where they are. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, somebody could actually eat that can of soup. So yeah.
So next year's soup throwing will be more radical for that reason.
Yeah. I'll make a stop here.
Sorry, I'm going to use that, GS.
Yeah, I guess my point was that the closing down of oil and gas fields, for extraction, is something that would be easier for them to demand if it wasn't such a short supply season or year. So it's almost like the governments or the elites of the world are planning in the same back room as Extinction Rebellion are, or listening in, which is not very difficult because everything XR and those activists do is out in the open. They are intentionally an open organization in that way. So it's, I think none of the actions are really secret about where they're going to strike and what they're going to do. Perhaps with the exception of the soup throwing action. I guess that is secret to a degree. Yeah.
Well, they're throwing soup for the windmills and solar. That's what their soup throwing is about. And Hallam is all over the place calling for windmills and solar. So I don't know what I think about that guy, because he seemed to be, I don't know. I mean, it's not for me to say, is it? I mean, I'm not going on YouTube and making these speeches about how everything's fucked. But I don't understand. I don't understand anything that's going on in the world. I think that's the tricky thing about these conversations. I feel that ultimately it's all going to boil down to just going, I don't understand anything, as a sort of mantra.
Yeah, but that's a classic, and it's actually a sign of a wise man that he knows the amount of things he doesn't know. So I think it's a much better approach to be aware of all the things you don't know to any depth. I think for Hallam, it may be just a matter of having been a potato farmer or whatever for so many years, which he was back in Wales. And as a farmer, and especially during floods and whatever, shitty weather, you don't have much time really to study climate change or ecology or anything, because you have to employ people, fire people, run after your potatoes. I don't know. I've never been a farmer, but I guess you have the hours of the days are full of activity. So I think to his defense, it's more like he's doing the right thing for the ecology and the climate. If it had been the 1980s, I think we can say.
Well, he's doing something, so that's admirable. And I sort of, I'm okay, it's a bit boring, isn't it? But I don't know. I'm not doing anything, am I? Roger Hallam's doing something, and I'm not doing anything. And then fucking Roger Hallam's banging on about windmills and solar, and it just makes me feel some sort of despair, I suppose, in the sense that Roger Hallam seemed to be a fairly switched on geezer. But in a way, well, my interpretation is that a lot of these people are kind of enslaved by the need to project a message that's palatable to the general public. But really, the general public can't palate anything other than, yes, go ahead, drive around in your Land Rovers all you like. You work hard and you deserve a holiday. And that's all the general public's interested in. And so someone like Hallam standing up and, making speeches about how doomed everything is extremely brave. And the fact that he's managed to become some sort of public person, So I feel sort of disappointed, but I feel like an asshole for being disappointed, because who am I to be disappointed really when these people are shouting on YouTube or gluing their face to a bloody art gallery? Yeah, I don't know. Is this an opportunity to segue into the do we want to talk about the 12 commandments of extinctionatism? Is this a topic that's worthy of touching upon in this particular evening?
Yeah, I guess it would maybe throw some light on the topic we are discussing now. I would just like to add that I think Roger Hallam is really admirable. His speeches show a great deal of insight. The reason I personally feel upset by it all, I guess, is because what he's done and what his movement has been able to do has made it even more clear how epically fucked we are. Because even if you block 5 bridges in London or block the motorways for 2 months every day, it still doesn't amount to anything real. And yes, I think without all of his doing, it would be less clear and more chaotic. How far away we are from a resolution.
Yeah, So, has anybody read the 12 Commandments then? Because I mean, there's sort of stuff in here that it's about. What is it about? It's about basically just dealing with the whole thing yourself, isn't it? Am I getting that right, GS? It's about the mental process, really, of I don't know, because it's this weird thing of like feeling like you know something about reality that the vast majority of other people refuse to acknowledge, and they could know. It's not like secret. It's not like understanding Fermat's last theorem, which is some weird occult mathematics thing that I could never understand what it is. I've no interest in it. It's some sort of secret information or whatever. It's occluded information. And blah blah blah. So only a tiny number of people can even grasp these sort of weird, wacky things. Well, I don't even know if that's true in that case, but for whatever example. But this is a piece of information that any Wally can understand, and so people are choosing not to digest this information, and in the face of not being able, and despite having the compulsion that some of us may have, or Roger Heller may have, or Just Up Oil may have. But again, Just Up Oil, they have that compulsion. They're more active than I am, but they're hailing the fucking windmills and solar panels. But you go, okay, fine. There's nothing anyone can do. The whole process is beyond repair anyway. And the 12 commandments are offering some sort of a bunch of suggestions really for how to like mentally deal with the situation once you've realized that. Am I barking up the right tree?
Yeah, I was looking at commandment number 11 and its application to the situation with the soup. Maybe you could go into that for a while.
Sorry?
Commandment number 11 and how it relates to the soup situation.
Shall I read it out?
Yes, please.
Commandment 11 is indecipherable alien code, is it?
Oh dear. Okay, yeah. My bad. Sorry.
I don't get commandment 11 at all, but I suppose that's it's the obtuse commandment. Hit me with another one then. Go on, hit me with a commandment.
Number 12 is about ripeness and tomato soup. Ripeness, perhaps. I'm not sure I understand it.
I never understood the ripeness is all, because I don't really understand the connection between fruit and life in that way, which is I sort of watched all the videos where Hugh talks about ripeness, the ripeness, and some connection to some Greek mythology, and someone said something about being ripe, and it's one of those things that I don't think I deal that well with this sort of poetic language. The ripeness is all, and definitely if we're forced to now take everything in the context of a tin of soup, that's probably beyond my linguistic capabilities altogether.
Yes, but maybe it's like everything has its time, and for tins they have their best before date. So yeah, maybe I could sort of.
They stay good beyond their best before date anyway, don't they? I mean, like, people have tins for years after the date that they're supposed to expire, and then they open the tin, the tin is fine.
But it's still a point, about let's say if you were going out on the town to find a new partner, you would look more towards the lower edge of the age spectrum than to the 80s and 90-year-olds. So it's kind of everything that is about life also is about timing, and we only live for about 100 years or something, and some say that's way too long. But that's everything that happens and that has meaning also has meaning within sort of a pretty tight spot of time. So as it relates to the question of acceleration and accelerationism, it's like, yes, maybe we as we have discussed before, maybe we could save a huge part of the biosphere if we collapsed human civilization at an earlier stage. But then on the other hand, what if that ends 1 billion people's lives 10 years earlier than it would otherwise, if there was no acceleration of the collapse? So you kind of get into those kinds of ethic questions, because I think the ripeness is all commandment. It talks about this kind of limited time availability. Maybe I'm totally off my rockers on that, but somebody else share their view, please.
I'm curious if you guys, are there any of the commandments that you think are actually controversial, or where you could equally argue like the opposite as a legitimate position?
I mean, arguing the opposite of something is easy peasy, isn't it? I mean, like, because you just, I mean, okay, never defile the sacred, just randomly to scroll past there. Always defile the sacred, because the sacred is stifling. It's often used to cause oppression and prevent open debate and so on and so forth. So you could say that. Is that a reasonable oppositional?
Yeah, it might be. Although I think one of the things that's interesting is that the first few lines of that commandment are, oh, and by the way, the sacred aren't things like religion or spiritualness or something. So like there's this almost a, a preface that says, oh, by the way, the things that you say that are sacred that are actually maybe stifling, that's not really sacred.
Yeah, but that's
So
sophistry, isn't it? Really?
yeah, exactly. So if you define in advance that, these fake symbols of sacred aren't really sacred, and if you accept that assumption, then like who would ever argue against, well then whatever is left that's truly sacred, we should never really defile that.
Yeah, but and then the kind of label becomes meaningless anyway, doesn't it? Because then it's a very it's subjective. Never defile your subjective perception of that which is sacred.
Right. I mean, let's take a different one. The first one I think is know thyself. Like, is there ever a situation where somebody would argue that you shouldn't know yourself?
Well, there is no
And
self. The self is an
uh,
illusion, and the object of a truly virtuous life is to break that illusion and to understand in a profound way that there is no self insofar as the self might represent a separate entity, and that the only sense of self that we have is actually the one cosmic self looking out through billions and billions of eyes through every life form that ever existed and ever will exist. But the self as an isolated entity is illusory.
Guys, I think number 10, the never defile the sacred. I think that is the closest we can get to a commandment or rule that applies to the soup throwing situation. The way I read it, the Van Gogh sunflower painting is an image, of course, is a depiction of the real sunflowers, the real natural beauty, you can say. So that these kids throwing soup on the sunflowers, they're not even throwing soup on the picture of the sunflowers, but on the glass in front of it, and they're not throwing soup on sunflowers per se, but a depiction of it. So I think the point 10 is not broken by the activists because the sacred is, as I understand it anyway, is nature and the functioning of nature itself. Like the ecosystems still working. Yeah, so I think that is the closest we get to something really, really to one of the rules that are really, really applicable to the soup stage.
Well, by talking about the soup, you're defiling it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking, like, from what Zoo was saying, like, is it argumentative to try and come up with a contradictory position on every commandment? Or Zoo, do you think it's a useful exercise? Does anyone? Is it a useful? Because I feel argumentative when I contradict it.
I'm less interested in whether it's argumentative, but it's more of a litmus test to see whether commandments are legitimate or not. And this comes from my time in corporate world, and often when you work inside corporations, they have things like values or these are the things that we really like, and then they have this like very kind of bland list of things like we work with integrity. And I've always said, is it a stretch to expect anything other than the people inside a company to work with integrity? And if it's not a stretch, then like who are they serving by publishing these core values or these rules? And so what's interesting is when you come up with a rule or a core value where it's truly there is like a really legitimate opposition to that. So like, an example could be we we never talk to the media. And there's maybe a reason why you might never talk to the media, but you could just as easily imagine like a legitimate position could be like, we operate with full transparency and we always talk to the media. And so there it's interesting because both sides are legitimate things to sort of imagine. They're just different. And so I'm just wondering, in the same way, for the commandments for the Extinctionati, are there any that are interesting because they really are taking a choice where there's alternatives that are truly possible or interesting? And things like know thyself, it feels a bit like one of these whitewashed or sort of really bland things because like who would ever say, no, we shouldn't know thyself? And so is it actually interesting to point out that this is something that's unique to the Extinctionati or really interesting or even debatable? And that's just my opinion, but I'm just curious, like what of these commandments do we think are interesting choices where there exist actually other choices you'd really consider?
Okay. Yeah, is obviousness necessarily a negative?
No, I think number 3 is close to what you're asking, Zoo. It's number 3 is avoid order and chaos, navigate the razor's edge between. I think that's really good, and you can see there are obvious alternatives that many people choose. Some people choose or are forced to live in chaos, and some people are obsessive about order. I find myself pretty much on the razor's edge between them because it's like, it's almost like when you're learning to drive a car or a bicycle that you are sort of compensating for. Last week was a bit chaotic, so now I'm gonna be Mr. Order, and then you tire of that and you kind of balance and go back into chaos. Yeah, so the razor's edge is where you want to be because you don't want to be a total bore and you don't want to be a total dropout. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I don't disagree. I think that that's a good example.
Mm-hmm. And then we have the next point, resist our global industrial civilization surreptitiously and aggressively. Yeah, I guess maybe the saying that resistance is futile applies here and could fit into the discussion. The soup throwers obviously are resisting, um, or you could even discuss that because are they resisting industrial civilization if they are arguing for windmills and solar panels, or are they just arguing for extending it by making it more recyclable? And I guess the contradiction to resisting it would be perhaps what some of us are doing, which is more like trying to enjoy the collapse or let's say hoping that it will spin itself into a rapid collapse, which doesn't really require resisting. You can kind of resist it in your mind by being against it, but just leaving it to its own devices, so it will crash sooner. Yeah. And I would have to also have to say about the next point 5, do not seek results. That has kind of always been a point or a saying that I've been skeptical about ever since Guy McPherson started spreading it. I think I'm kind of a consequentialist or results matter guy. That's why I don't sit on the motorways every day, because there are no results from sitting on the motorways every day. And even if I lived in London, I probably wouldn't sit on the motorway because my brain tells me that there is no paradise on the other end of sitting on the motorway. It doesn't solve the problems that we're having. I can respect those who do sit on the motorway, but to me, it's not something I would spend my time on.
I guess the world is so chaotic that if you do something or don't do something, I think the more nutty. I mean, the one thing that I think is cool about the soup is that it's a bit sort of wacky. There isn't really anything in the National Gallery that's got anything to do with climate change in any sort of cold logical sense. It's free, so anyone can go there and look at whatever elite paintings. Yeah, so I think maybe wacky things. I used to, I don't know. Well, maybe I don't know if I still. Maybe I've turned my whole life into this, and I don't know if anybody relates to this. Please don't admit it if you do. But I found one coping mechanism when I was younger. Maybe more going into adolescence. I'm not sure in my younger years before that, but it's sort of allowing myself to emphasize the personal characteristics which would make other people think I was fucking mad, and not necessarily in an outrageous way. I'm not a berserker, but stuff where you realize that you could respond to interactions in a few different ways, and there's this kind of idea, that not an idea, is it? We sort of project our personas to the society around us according to what we believe is acceptable and so on, but we all harbor the desire to react to things in ways that aren't socially acceptable. And I think I've used the ability to react to things in a non-socially acceptable way as a kind of coping mechanism, i.e., that bloke's a bit unhinged, so I'm not going to argue, or I'm not going to try and force him to go along with me, or I'm not going to make him stay in the army that I've drafted him into, which was a really beneficial time to use that strategy. Basically pretending, well, this is it. I can't say definitively that it was just pretending, but to the extent, well, okay, I'll stick my neck out and say I was pretending to be a bit mad on various occasions, and I wonder if that, and people, who do sort of have a breakdown or something. Again, I'm not coming from any place of official knowledge about the subject, but certainly I get the impression that people have breakdowns where they become unable to conduct themselves within society's norms, and that might partly be a sort of a mechanism, a coping mechanism, basically. I can't handle this anymore. And I'm not saying that I think a lot of people sit down and go, right, I think I'm going to have a breakdown now, but people stop functioning within society because they've run out of ways to cope with whatever society's throwing at them. I hope that's an acceptable description of what I'm saying. And maybe that happening in a more public way, i.e., okay, today throwing soup, tomorrow, I don't know, throwing, I don't know what, at something else. I can't think of a wacky thing, or just maybe what am I trying to say here? In the absence of any kind of like realistic and practical behaviors that we can enact that will allow us to respond to the situation of like social, economic, and ecological collapse, that allow us to respond to those things in some way that might possibly alleviate the horrible stuff that's going to happen, probably sooner than later. Maybe just like behaving in a bonkers way is the next best thing. And so maybe the thing I'll wear a Just Stop Oil t-shirt and don a clown's uniform and juggle swords or something in the shopping center and see if I can stab myself in the eye. Or not, no, I don't mean that, because we're not self-destructive, but I don't know, I'm rambling now. Am I making any sort of coherent sense? Like maybe like surreal behavior will be a realistic reaction.
I think you're making a lot of sense, and I just want to say hi to DB who popped in, and then I'm going to go on. And
Hi, DB.
I think you're making a lot of sense, Bob, but also that the answer to your question is very close at hand. Behind the soup, the art, and if you kind of feeling that, or if somebody is feeling that their personal thinking or feeling is at odds with those of the greater society, maybe you feel that you're going mad, or more likely you're feeling that society has gone mad. Then there is the sunflowers or the painting, the art, the artistic life more in general, which has many other aspects than the kind of money machine industry, industrial way of thinking, and many people say it's also much more human to delve into the artistic, and it's not just an elite thing. I think maybe somebody used the word elite art or something. The latest tweet I read about the soup situation at the art museum was actually that Van Gogh himself was basically skint or out of money most of his life, and he basically hated human society and completely loved nature and natural things, flowers. So this guy on Twitter thought that Van Gogh would definitely approve 100% of throwing soup on his painting. But in general, my advice to everybody who feels that this system is completely effed up is to check out your musical skills, your writing skills, your painting skills, your sculpturing skills, your whatever artistic skills, and spend your short life accordingly. And remember that the ripeness is all. I think there is some kind of sculptural thing within that ripeness commandment as well, about the shape of things. I'll shut up now.
Bob, I really love the idea that the only sort of rational response to sort of the hopeless situation is a completely irrational response, like soup or being slightly crazy. I think that's I think that speaks to sort of maybe the helplessness that people feel.
Yeah, it makes me think. I'm thinking now about the Wibble scene in Blackadder. I don't know if you lot are familiar with Blackadder, but in the fourth episode, not fourth episode, fourth series of the comic masterpiece starring Rowan Atkinson, that is Blackadder, which covers the events of World War One in really a brilliant TV show about how horrible World War One is, with amazing like humor and sort of tragedy mixed together. Anyway, but he decides to the main character decides to get out of going over the top by pretending to be insane. And he sticks a couple of pencils up his nose and puts a pair of underpants on his head and says "Wibble," and that's his effort there. Maybe I'll see if I can find the episode on YouTube, although I recommend watching the whole series. But yeah, maybe yeah, because you sort of, I mean, if I mean, to bring it back to this commandments thing and the 4 and 5 that we talked about, which is, resist surreptitiously, don't seek results, which on one hand is a sort of cop out, which, because anybody can sort of say, oh well, I'm acting in a very subtle way, and so that the gluing themselves to the road people could say, hey, that's a cop out, man, because we're gluing ourselves to the road here, and you're just like acting surreptitiously. So for all we know, you're doing nothing. And I've sort of told myself over the years that I'm sort of acting surreptitiously by being in constant defiance of all authorities, but not in some way that's noisy enough for anybody to notice. And so, well, as I said, there are times that I've managed to extract myself from being drafted into, I got drafted into an army and got myself out of it. And that was a sort of, I guess, a specific thing. But just by, not from a small age, not doing school, not listening to anybody in a position of authority, not respecting people with titles in their name, and, just generally having a very low level of consideration for the norms of modern culture. And it starts off as a sort of gut reaction to things that doesn't make any sense, and then you sort of overlay that on top of, oh my god, this civilization is insane, and therefore the way I've naturally chosen to respond to any form of authority or I can't think of the other word, but any sort of authority. So like as DB was saying about, Van Gogh would have probably approved of the soup throwing, and there is this issue of like this, how dare these people defy, and this is something I was saying earlier, on Twitter, one of the responses I've been doing, God help me, I don't know why I'm on there, but one of the responses I've been making to this whole soup thing is, who even gives a shit? It's just a fucking painting. And the idea of these like sanctified objects, that because this particular person drew these sunflowers or whatever, oh wow, that's like, that would be a tragedy to lose. And again, it's not a particularly original point to make, is it? But so yeah, but within the context of their sort of, and we tend to, as a group, I think, acknowledge that there's nothing we can do about anything. And within that context, maybe all thinking to ourselves, what is the most like unhinged we could be? And maybe some people have to, people who are working and have to earn a living within sort of frameworks where types of behavior are very, have to be very moderate in your behavior. Maybe there's very, very subtle ways you could be unhinged, and maybe other people, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to be working within the context of music making and so on. And so in a way, I've got a little bit of license to say outrageous things or behave in kind of ridiculous ways, because I'm perceived as a sort of member of the artistic community who's living a slightly eccentric life compared to the normies. The paintings are worthless without humans to be able to, I guess, experience them, isn't it, DB? But yeah, I'm just saying, for anybody, there must be various parameters of insanity that they could invoke, whether it's very mild or more blatant. That's individual, but maybe maybe a mission. Maybe we could add a 13th commandment: is be a bit unhinged wherever you can.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a run-in with my sisters and uncle and stuff on email. Like yourself, Bob. I consider myself an eccentric and yeah, not a musician but a writer. And so I feel that I have to be a little bit more uh, on the front end of things and finding out what is true and not. And in this specific case, I informed, tried to inform my former family about a certain medical thing being for 2.5 years
Live streaming is on.
It's back on.
every day. And that, of course, made a lot of waves within this family, and but in the end, I kind of found out the same thing that Bob said, that other people, other members of that family have other kinds of jobs and occupations, which are more like 9 to 5. Don't stick your head out and try to, blend in with the rest, and don't express your opinions if you have any, and don't try to gain any opinions that are out of the ordinary, which I find kind of sad. I don't really think I could have chosen to be any different than I am, because if I'm curious about something, I just find out about it and go to the bottom of it. And after being locked down for 2 years, I mean, what the fuck? You're going to look into why and who did that, and yeah, the whole thing around it, because this is not it's not good. I'll just end it there. And to the drafting, we don't have a draft in Norway, but we have a compulsory, or back in my day anyway, there was a compulsory enrollment of all assigned male individuals at birth, and if you didn't want to go into the first time service in the military, you had to write a letter and say why not. And after that, I was called down to the local police station, which is routine when they receive these refuse military letters. And the guy actually spent 4 hours on the typewriter interrogating me about why I didn't want to shoot people in the military. And I kind of found that to be very strange at the time. Why it would take him 4 hours to understand that this wasn't something I wanted to do. But afterwards, it kind of made more sense to me, because he wasn't so much interested in the military service as he was interested in interrogating me on behalf of his bosses, his higher ups in Norway and across the ocean. So he wanted to know, okay, what kind of troublesome person is this guy? And one of his questions to me, which I remember very well, was, "Do you think we should have a police force in Norway?" And I said, "What the fuck? Why do you ask me that? Of course we should have a police force." So he was kind of conducting a political interrogation of me, as if I was sitting on Guantanamo Bay or something, and just the mapping out the kind of dissident population in his country for later use, for employment and for what they were going to do to counter you later in life. So that's my feeling anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of got myself removed from military service, partly because I would have failed any. Well, I was interviewed by a bunch of psychiatrists and so on, and they were kind of perplexed that someone doesn't value those things. And like, I don't know if anybody asked me if there should be a police force, but I probably would have said not in my opinion. But I was interviewed about the sort of norms of society, and as it happens, where I was growing up, they had very detailed records on my entire life since school. And so various incidents, I mean, I was obviously would have been about 17 at the time, and various incidents since I was 6 years old were brought up, and I was quizzed about why did you do this? Why did you do that? And one of the main things I hate to say was that they considered that I was a highly intelligent human being who'd completely failed school. And they regarded that as, not particularly in my favor from their point of view, whereas I regarded that as a great, I thought that if I was at all likely to think that I'm intelligent, then my ability to fail school was one of the things that would make me feel that was the case. So, yeah. But it's, again, I managed to get out of all of that by allowing the more unhinged part of my personality free rein. So again, I guess coming back to that idea that, where people can allow the unhinged part of their personality to be dominant in a situation where they would normally repress it, I guess maybe that would be quite a good form. Well, I don't know. Now, see, this is me talking from the rational side of my personality and thinking, oh, well, yeah, that would be a good form of rebellion, whatever. It doesn't really make any difference, though, does it? But yeah, I don't know. But that's my new idea. It's not even a new idea, but that's my idea for the day. Let's try and behave in a nutty way if we possibly can. And I guess me and Going South are available to offer coaching.
Yes, what you're saying, it reminds me of, I can't remember the quote exactly, but it's about our last avenue of freedom in the concentration camp situation. Obviously, this was written by some inmate in a concentration camp. Your last avenue of freedom is to decide how you react to it, how you think about it, how you feel about things. So the guards and stuff can command you around, but you can still decide how you are going to speak about it inside your head.
I actually have a visceral hatred of that book. What was his name? Fucking Viktor Frankl is the guy who wrote the book about. He is a psychoanalyst or a psychiatrist, and he said, "Yeah, well, I was in Auschwitz, and the people who gave up and didn't have a hope for the future, they just dropped dead. But the people who thought, oh, when this is all over, I'm going to go to Jamaica and open a tourist resort or whatever, or I'm going to open a toenail healing clinic or something. Those are the people who managed to kind of get their head together and who were more likely to survive." And I felt a lot of resentment about that. And I know that that's being used all the time. And there's these little, you get these little meme things on Instagram where somebody posts a little quote and it's like, and Frankel, he sort of said, and he made a correct observation, or he made an observation that seems in conjunction with the sort of Eastern spiritual view, as I understand it, really not being an expert on such matters, but he talks about that there's this space, right, between your experiencing of a thing and the way you emotionally react to it, if I remember correctly. And so, you know, if you can deal with that space, and in that space go, oh, this thing is happening and I can choose kind of my reaction, that's what freedom is. It's kind of true, but at the same time, I think when you bring the whole Auschwitz thing into it, then they're banging you over the head with it. And I feel that gets used now to kind of oppress people who are really not managing very well. So people who, you know, all this sort of like, I have a lot of encounters with people on the various spectrums, you know, and people who I feel genuinely can't cope with civilization. And then they get told, oh yeah, but it's just your reaction to this is wrong. You know, it's just like, if you could manage your reaction to this, you know, there's not, do you know what I mean? It's like used. So I think it's coming, it is kind of, he is right, but I think it's just become, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can see that side of it. But I think, you know, if you transfer what he said about his situation over to the soup situation, no, over to the over to the collapse situation, more seriously, then you can have, you know, if you enlarge sort of what he's saying to the bigger picture today, then you can say that, okay, we are in collapse. Industrial society is in collapse for everybody, for all of us. And we collectively can, everyone, choose how we react to it. Then maybe it makes more sense in a current setting, because you know, either you can try to do as Sid Smith wants us to do, which is to enjoy being alive at this specific point in the planet's history, where these things are going to go down. Or you can glue yourself to the motorway and throw soup at the Dutch paintings in the gallery, or do other kind of what I would call kind of desperate things, like joining the net zero windmill kind of initiatives. Yeah, which I personally think are outdated or too late, or yeah. So I think it makes sense on the larger societal scale, that we can each, or as societies and individuals and everything, choose to be in utter despair every single day and work our ass off for some windmills that will never uh, solve it. Or we could try to, this is maybe my point, we could maybe try to be as human, as artistic, as what should we say, as species typical in a positive way as we can, as cultural, as considerate, and as expressive and creative and reflective as we possibly can within the last few years that we actually can do that, because after that it's going to be running after this deer to catch it and eat it, and you know, fishing or having our hands in the dirt to grow stuff. So choosing how we deal with a situation, and if you want to feel totally desperate and afraid every day, you know, with today's nuclear threats and everything, or if we are going more in the Sid Smith direction with trying to enjoy, rejoice, get inspired. I mean, maybe this sounds totally nuts, but yeah, I think we do have the choice, and we can perhaps make life better for the people around us, by choosing the latter option.
Yeah, to inspire others. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've made the point perfectly. Would this be a good sort of moment to wrap this up then, with a sort of well, it can't be bettered, GS, in my opinion.
Well, let's see if R and DB wants to add something, I guess.
I'd like to respond to what Zoo said a while back about the media. Some media, they tell the truth, and some media, they don't. So, like, I remember Prince, he didn't want to give any interviews after a while because they made up stories about him. So, you gotta know who to trust, I guess.
Yes, the German guy I posted a video interview with on the subreddit. He did the same thing. He used to be in the German um, uh, health ministry or some kind of health, and he used to be in the European Council, which is a sort of federal thing in Europe, and a highly respected person until he managed to stop the 2009 swine flu by saying it was all fake. It was all a fake pandemic. And then he was kind of sorted out of the matrix, squeezed out of the matrix, and lost all these power positions. But he actually managed to single-handedly stop the 2009 pandemic because it wasn't a pandemic, and he just said so at an important meeting. So what he does about the media now is, because the media has kind of shut him out, he has, together with his wife, gone on to social media that he can do himself, with videos and stuff. And because he has such a massive reach, because he used to be one of the top guys in German and European health institutions, he really gets out to a lot of people. So whenever the mainstream media approaches him these days, he is in a position to set a lot of requirements for even talking with them. That he's going to be able to ask them questions. He's going to be able to require the whole thing to be published and not just smaller parts, and he can also just refuse. So I think it's very important to be aware of how the mainstream media operates. That they can interview you for 2 hours and use 2 seconds of what you said. Maybe the 2 seconds after you finish, and have a cigarette with the interviewer, and you're relaxing, and then you say something honest, and he uses that instead of the two hours if he just filmed.
There's one question I did want to ask, and this was about was it Lord Hugh who originally wrote the 12 commandments, 12 rules? Did other people have input?
I think it was him.
It's interesting because I'm wondering whether this then is sort of if you look at these 12 rules and you sort of think of it as like a hologram on some on a personality or something, is this really a picture of Hugh? If you take all of these rules and you sort of imagine the person who's living or aspiring to live by them all, and you sort of treat it like a hologram where it's created by all these different rules, is Hugh the person that emerges from that then?
Yes, I think that's right. Maybe it's you, and maybe it's the group that you created.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a hologram because a person is far more complex than some rules. Yeah, it's hard to say. I never really asked him, but I'm pretty sure he probably believed that these would be good things to follow in general.
I think somebody is walking.
Also, I'm pretty sure you all probably went over this because I was, late to the meeting, but in terms of doing the more artistic life, um this because you'll start to become more sensitive, especially to suffering. And the thing is not to judge the suffering you feel. I think, I mean, I'm not too sure because one of the examples I think of is when Nietzsche went mad. There's lots of stories about why that happened. Like some people are stupid and say his own philosophy drove him insane. Um, but I think that if the story is true that he saw some asshole beating a horse with a whip, um, that he fell into a vision of suffering that he could never escape from, and that's probably what you know caused him to lose his mind. Um, we'll have to be careful of that, but at the same time, I don't think it's wise to scream and yell and judge the things you feel and pathologize it because I'm pretty sure tribal people are just as sensitive as that to suffering.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult from a distance, and from a distance physically, and over time, a century later, to look into to what degree he went mad. I know even in our days, it's like a definition. It's a kind of question of definition, and some people would say that if you don't support Ukraine, you are obviously mad. and if you are ruling the Russian Empire, you have to be mad. So yeah, we've heard about a lot of philosophers and poets and stuff who went mad more or less on a regular basis. There's a very famous Norwegian guy, very close to nature, kind of farmer poet guy, and he used to go mad in the sense of going into an institution every time he finished a collection of poetry, and that was kind of his reaction to people around him and to what he had created. Uh, you know, when you're done with a book and everybody is just going on with their lives and harvesting their fields and not caring one bit about what you created and maybe the gap between where you are mentally and what people your neighbors care about, which can be hard for people. And if you live like he did without a wife and you know, alone, I can totally see him, you know, feeling the need to go into one of those mental places.
Yeah,
But back, yeah,
yeah, I can totally relate to that, but the thing is like, I mean, the thing is when I went into doing my drawings, I never even considered trying to make money off of it, like, because I think that alone will cause it to be a miserable experience.
mm,
And then on the other hand, it's like you literally live in two worlds when you start doing this stuff. Like
yeah,
in one world, I literally like I'm in a forest or by the ocean. I'm just in these pristine places. And then on the other hand, I'm in this hell that we have created. Humans have created this. I just it's literally fucking hell compared to, you know, the natural world and the peace. And I've been told like by my parents like, "Oh, you need to get off Fantasy Island and um your obsession with animals is a phase." But when I saw wolves in person, it was much better than whenever I saw them in visions or in dreams. And yeah, the lack of, you know, alien cortex bullshit was just paradise for me. It's like
mm,
if humans have lived this way before, like what the fuck happened? Because we have created hell on earth. This fucking this civilization, this grind for money, like it's complete madness. And yet, if you say this stuff, like I talked to a coworker a couple weeks ago, and he could not fathom the fact that I do not want more money. Like it was completely anathema to him.
mm,
Um, yeah, he couldn't fathom why I wasn't wanting to work more hours and get more money and get a car. And it's like, well, what can you say? If I told the truth, I would say, well, the reason why you want all that stuff is probably because you're a slave and you're just indoctrinated and you never considered anything else in your life. But, you know, what can you do in that situation? So I sort of just passively kind of, you know, tried to figure out the puzzle and tell him everything he wanted to hear and just said, yeah, I just live this way just because, you know, because some people you just can't tell the truth to at all.
yeah. It's a different way of living and a different way of thinking, and I'm totally where you are when it comes to money. And you know, of course, I would like to make $1 million from my next novel, but I think it's a much better thing for your next piece of work that you are not in it for the money and you're in it to for it to make sense to yourself, for it to be something you would like to watch or you would like to read. And it reminds me that there is this there is this. I will get back to you about the poet later. So I'll just finish this sentence. There is this kind of expectation or misunderstood expectations about, for instance, a writer. That when a writer or when a person who is not yet a writer sits down to become a writer and write a book or two, that his book is going to be the best book ever, or the book to end all books or whatever, uh, which is totally not how it is at all. Actually, it's more like stepping your toe into the sea at the beach. Putting your toe into the water and becoming a part of this vast universe of other writers who've been creating things, and so it's not like it's less like replacing all the other works before you with your new fantastic thing, and it's more like becoming a part of that tribe of writers. And what you experience is that once you go into the effort of trying to write something beautiful or fantastic, then you also immediately start appreciating all the other works before you and beside you in a much more profound way, because you start thinking about, oh my god, I know how difficult this is to this is to create, and how difficult it is to generate these scenes or these personalities and stuff. So you read it in a totally different way after you have become a small part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's like, yeah, I feel like that is true that people don't truly understand like the craft unless they do it themselves. Like with reading stories and stuff, you literally like the words are kind of standing before some light, and then once you get past the words and touch that light, you sort of get sucked into like this portal, and then you're right there. Like you've stepped into a fragment of another reality, and then you're there with other people and other beings, and it's kind of incredible. And yeah, like paintings are similar too. It's like an image scene that you can step into for a moment as a portal. Um yeah, I don't know if a portal is a good way to see it, but that's probably the best one I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way to kind of remind other people in society that there is this kind of beauty of landscapes and forests. And I used to be totally in love with this girl in Copenhagen in my younger days, and she would take me to Louisiana, which is the national art museum just outside Copenhagen, and just the feeling of being dragged along there, totally against my will, or not a part of my plan for anything, and just walking around and getting all these visual impressions of painters and other artists. It's just fantastic, and just adds so much more to your already uh, very strong infatuation with this person. Uh, so yeah, I recommend that for everybody who is young or who is in a relationship with somebody who is an artist or who is not an artist, to drag them
Yeah,
along. Yeah.
those feelings, may put color into the world. It's pretty incredible. Yeah, I won't speak any more on that, but yeah, it does. It intensifies experience and just breathes color. Those feelings do.
Good. So what do you say, Bob? Have you fallen asleep? We are coming up to the 2-hour mark, so maybe we should make a run for it. Bob!
Oh, is it late where he lives?
No, but it's going to be clipped again by the software.
He got lost in the soup.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Yeah, holy shit, the world is fucking insane.
Bob.
You're muted, Bob. If you're trying to talk, you're muted.
Is it me? Maybe I went to the loo.
Bob, you need to make a summary of all the 12 commandments and relate it to the ingredients of this soup that was thrown on the painting.
And
I'm of a certain age where I do have to go to the loo rather a lot, actually.
and
Okay,
when you
okay.
write it in this way, you need to make it into the form of a poem.
Yeah, and with a painting to go with it as well. So that's
Oh my god! how do you? Well, I suppose I could probably try and paint soup. I might just be able to do that.
you could paint it the way that Baldric does in that Blackadder series. He was ordered to paint whatever comes from within. You remember
Yep.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you paint, you must have the mastery to put somehow in your brushstrokes subliminal messages of the 12 commandments in poetic form.
Oh my good god! I don't think I'm equal to the task. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to try and probably get out of this odious task.
Maybe you can just play a little song by the Soup Dragons, to take an easy way out.
Well,
The
don't worry,
Soup
Bob.
Dragon.
Going south isn't getting off the hook. He has to put it in mathematics next.
Oh, right, okay. Well, yeah, that's probably sooner him than me, anyway. Well, I am wondering if it's time to wind this up, as I need to split. What's the consensus?
Okay.
3 more hours.
No.
3 more. I'm kidding. Kidding.
Okay, I know. Let's play some Prince Rogers Nelson.
Oh, any particular request? Even though I think that's another possible what do you call it? Copyright strike, isn't it? If we do that.
It's not actually a strike. It's just a notification. They don't pull down the video.
Well, let's finish with some Prince. As good as an Chantillon.
Purple soup.
Purple soup. Okay. Do I get to choose then? I'm just going for a random one. Om Shanti Om. Arrivederci, comrades. That's the end of the meeting.
Okay, good night.
Thank you. Take
See you
care.
next week.